What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we are here with Stefan of Canto. Thank you so much for being here today. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so cool to have you here. So we have the new album that just came out this past Friday, To the Power of Eight. Was the intention to just make a direct continuation of Trust and Rust, or were you trying to maybe do something a little bit different and take a new approach with this particular album?
Yeah, so I think Trust and Rust was a little bit of a second debut for us, where due to the lineup change, we tried out many different sounds, composing styles, also different songwriters and so on, different singing styles. And of course, after having a European tour, some gigs on like 70,000 tons of metal, and also in Russia, we grew together in this new lineup. So it was planned that this new album is not just the next album after Trust and Rust, but also bringing in everything we learned. Yeah, and then this special setup came with three lead singers. So, of course, this changed everything in terms of songwriting and arrangement. So it was a very special album for me as a songwriter as well.
I wanted to ask you about that. Bringing in three singers to the band, do you almost have to like adjust the instrumentation in a way to kind of like make the instrumentation support each vocalist differently, or does not really have no much to do with it?
That's a good question. I don't think that the instrumentation changed so much. It was perhaps it was a little bit easier because with three singers you can of course already build a complete harmony without any additional vocals. So the guitar vocals perhaps could just sound like they would sound as a guitar and not would have to show what the harmonies of the songs are. So good questions now that I'm thinking about it, but it was not that we planned that or that I really noticed this while writing. It felt quite natural, and the thing that really was outstanding on this session was the way we arranged for the three lead singers.
Yeah, because I've always wondered with bands that have multiple vocalists, like, you see like a lot of metalcore bands, how they have the, harsh vocals and the clean vocals, so they have to like, adjust the style to sort of fit it. But then like an example would be a band like Lacuna Coil or Amaranth, where they don't really have to adjust the instrumentation too much to suit the vocals. So it was always interesting having three vocalists. They have to bring in a different layer of emotion and bring in brand new ideas, right? And even lyrical ideas as well, right?
Yeah, and especially if some of these singers, in our case Hagen himself, has a very broad range of different vocal styles, like from a monomarth growls to AC/DC screams. So if you have that range already in one singer, and then you have three of them, of course you have endless possibilities, which is good. But you always also have to somehow keep focus on what's needed for the song and what's needed for Van Canto style. So yeah, it was. I love the creative or creativity behind this process of songwriting for three singers. It was, for me, it was the jackpot, because every idea I had for a song, it was so easy for me to continue with that idea, because I knew there will be at least one singer who can perfectly transport this idea, and I would not have to care about writing around a certain singing style or vocal range or something like that.
Do you sometimes lay down the music first? Like, do you always have to lay down the music first before like you know who sings over what, or like how do you decide who sings over what part?
Yeah, so in this songwriting session, we had both ways. There were some songs that were just written, and then the vocals were like distributed between the three singers. And there are also songs on the album that were specifically written for with a lead singer in mind. Like, for example, Hard Rock Padlock was just written for Sly's voice, or Faith Focus Finish with Inga, and Heads Up High for Hagen. So both of that. But for example, with Falling Down, our first single, we really had different arrangement states, where we had different lead singers, or one taking the higher voice and then we arranged it in a lower voice, or we made a key change. So there was a lot of creative decisions on the way that led to the final result.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that like Trust and Rust, your previous album, was almost kind of like a new debut for the band. So like with this sort of like lineup change and this new sort of this whole lineup in general, would you say that you were trying to make something that was drastically different from albums such as Try Before Us or Break the Silence or Dawn of the Brave or Voices of Fire, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, every album somehow had something new. So especially Voices of Fire as a concept album with all these choirs and narrative parts in between. It was also special, but of course we always could build on the sound that we established on the former album then. And with a new lead singer, of course, there's a lot of things that change because there's another distribution of high and low vocals. There's a different sound perhaps of the voicing itself, because Hagen has more of a rough voice, and then of course a rough guitar does not sound that rough if the lead singer is already rough. So there were a lot of small things that changed and that we had to adjust. And as I said, after 3 years together and touring together, all these things feel way more natural, and then it's way easier to write the next album with all these learnings in mind. That's why I call it a second debut, because we had to make some of these experience for the first time.
And I imagine that there's a lot that helped open more doors in the future. Like I know that To the Power of Eight just came out last week, but I'd imagine that new doors have opened up for even five more albums for Von Canto, right?
Yeah, from the singing styles, definitely. I mean, we never managed to have, for example, a entire growl song on a Van Canto album, but this time it just felt right because we had the feeling we can do everything because we have so many singing possibilities. Then why not do it? And yeah, exactly. I think from the creativity that comes from three different lead singers, there are endless possibilities, not just for one album, but yeah. Currently, we have one album to promote, and then let's take it from there.
Do you think that also maybe stepping into this territory, this has to also broaden your audience a little bit more as well, right? Like, because having songs that have only growls on it, like I mean, I could see you doing a tour with a band like Ensiferum or Amon Amarth, but I could see you do like a folk metal tour with a band like Tyr or Korpiklani, but I could see you tour with like a really fun rock band, like I could see you do a tour with Steel Panther even at this point. So like you clearly have like a very diverse audience and can really broaden your horizons more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is also can be seen when we play on festivals, that we really have like a broad range of attendance on a festival concert. And I think if you are open-minded enough to listen to a metal band without guitars, then you are naturally also open-minded for different metal styles. So it's not that we only have power metal fans or true metal fans that would not accept anything besides their style, because if they were that narrow-minded, so to say, they would never listen to a band without guitars anyway. So we can tour with everybody as long as it's somehow related to metal, I guess.
What makes a power metal band power metal? I've been avoiding this topic, but lately it's been kind of like a discussion I'd like to have, whether a band is labeled metalcore or a band is labeled like progressive. Like, what is power metal in a way? Because like I think all music, like I think Whitney Houston has power behind her voice and behind her music.
Yeah,
So like
that's true.
to you, what is there like an element that all power metal bands, whether it's Sabaton or whether like and a lot of symphonic metal bands kind of get thrown into that category as well. To you, what makes something power metal?
Yeah, so first of all, I agree that the term power should not only apply to power metal bands. I mean, a thrash metal band is very powerful as well. But if it comes to the style definition, I think that a lot of power metal lies in the relationship between drums and the chord progressions. So that's why you can also do power metal style without guitars. And for example, if you mentioned Sabaton, for example, they are very chord-based bands. So you can play nearly every Sabaton song just on a piano because you can play the chords and you recognize the song. But for example, Metallica's Master of Puppets would not work so well on a piano, perhaps because they are more riff based. So I think the power metal style also is defined by being more harmony based, of course, having some kind of heroic attitude to it, and then the way the drums kick in with that double bass stuff and so on somehow defines power metal. And I feel comfortable with being associated with power metal, although I think Van Canto did a lot of styles from hard rock to even thrash metal riffing styles that I personally don't need to be power metal, but it's totally okay for me.
Yeah, like to me, like when I think of power metal, like I think a lot of the bands that sort of like popularized it were maybe a band like Blind Guardian or Sonata Arctica or that sort of style. But like even still, like I mean, I never understood like that term power metal. I feel like all metal is powerful, whether it's Killswitch Engage, whether it's Iron Maiden, whether it's Morbid Angel. I just think that like all metal is powerful in its own right. So what?
Absolutely, I would agree, and it even gets more ridiculous, so to say, if somebody calls metal true metal, because what should be true? I mean, for those who are into thrash metal, then their favorite thrash metal band is the true metal for them. So I think just the public needs some labels that can be put easily on a new release, so they can somehow know what they can expect. And somebody called it power metal. Don't ask me who it was.
Yeah.
Perhaps not the most clever decision. I don't know.
You could blame us journalists for it. I didn't say it, but somebody in our field did. We'll take responsibility for that label.
Agree.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, metal has been like, I don't think there's any style of music ever that has broadened off into so many of its own different subgenres as well. Either like I'm trying to think like R&B is R&B, rap is rap, country is country, like but like metal, there's like all these different hybrids. My favorite is when somebody just says a word and adds core at the end of it, and then that's a new
Yeah.
genre, and then you go on Wikipedia and there's like two bands in that whole genre. But
Of course, but perhaps if you ask somebody who's really into the, I don't know, country scene or rap scene, I'm quite sure he would also be able to define different substyles, and we would just call it, oh, that's all rap. And somebody who's not into metal perhaps thinks that no matter if you're listening to, I don't know, Megadeth, Shadow Gallery, or Sonata Arctica, oh, that's just metal. So perhaps the more you are into a certain style of music, the more you are able to distinguish between all that sub-genres and sub-styles.
yeah, I'm pretty sure a bunch of diehard Garth Brooks fans love to shit on Brad Paisley. So
For example.
yeah. Kind of going back to like the songwriting process, because you mentioned that like an album such as Voices of Fire was a very concept-driven album and stuff. Do you sometimes, as a band, think of like a concept or a story beforehand, and that could help influence on how you apply your instrumentation?
Yeah, so for Voices of Fire we did, but apart from that we don't do that too much, because the idea of Van Canto lies more in the single songs and not so much in the overall concept. That's a good thing, I think, because with our instrumentation we are able to bring something to sound like Van Canto, even if it's a completely different style. And that's why we would not have a concept applied that limits us in any way. If I want to write a hard rock song, I want to write a hard rock song. But for example, for Voices of Fire, something like Hard Rock Padlock would not have worked out so well, I guess, because it's not in the concept then, if you sing about dragons and fantasy and everything. So I think that Van Canto is a band that does perfectly fine without any concept. But the concept album was also fun to do once, but not all the time.
Yeah, it's cool that you have many different angles that you could approach your songwriting process with. For you, do you find it maybe easier to come up with new ideas, whether it's riffs or song structures or etc., when you're like maybe alone in isolation? Isolation's a great fuel for creativity, after all. Or do you like to be maybe in the company of your other bandmates as you are songwriting?
Yeah, so with Van Canto, I have to be honest, it's really not a band where you can meet in the rehearsal room and jam around and then have a new idea. It's really about most of the time one main songwriter per song who works out like 80% of the song and the arrangement and then shares with the others. We did a little bit different in the Voices of Fire album. So there, Bastian, the drummer, and me really stood together in the rehearsal room with guitar and drums and composed the basis of a song, because we knew that the specialty about the song will come in the choir arrangements after that. So we were able to have that more jam feeling again. But for example, for the current album, it was, yeah, as you said, writing in isolation and then sharing the arrangement with the bandmates afterwards.
You played also with a lot of different bands as well, such as Jester's Funeral and a lot of other bands as well. So like, you also played with Unrest, I believe. So like,
Wow. I think you're the first individual on this earth who actually knows that I played with Unrest. Kudos. Well,
I read too much, but
cool.
but like, does the mind frame of creativity like change depending on the project you work with, or do you have like a usual method behind the madness that like applies to everything?
Yeah, I think as you cannot turn back time and decide for different paths to choose, I just can tell the way it turned out to become. So of course, with Just as Funeral as a teenager band, playing together with Bastian back then already, we just had not so much experience like we have today. So we wrote songs by playing together in the rehearsal room. We did not have big recording capacity, so we just wrote something that we could remind the next Wednesday. And then when Canto came, so perhaps if we did it the other way around, starting with an a cappella band and then forming Just as Funeral 15 years later, then things would have turned out differently. So for me, it has to fit to the band, and something like an a cappella arrangement needs a lot of love and to details and dedication to really working something out for different singers. So it's more, there's more work behind it than just jamming. That's perhaps the major difference between a regular metal band and Van Canto.
Well, when I hear Van Canto's music, and I don't know like exactly what your full musical background is, but like it sounds studied in a way. Like, is there a theoretical element that you, or a classic? Does anybody have like a every single band has that one theory nerd, like, and maybe I'm speaking to him now, but like is there like a theoretical element that you apply into your songwriting?
Yeah, I mean, I am nerdy by all means, but it's not that I studied music or something. So everything that I learned in terms of songwriting, I learned because I was interested in it, and I also like harmonic relationships, so scales and chords. But it's not that I like jazz, for example. So for me, it always has to be a good ratio between knowing what you're doing, especially if you're arranging something for 8 singers. You somehow have to know a little bit about vocal ranges and intervals and how things play together. But I don't want music to sound like it was created by just a brain. So like jazz music sometimes sounds to me that everybody could explain you why it should sound great, but it just doesn't to me. So I think Van Canto and the singing as a technique also is about transporting feelings, and perhaps it's about the ratio and the relationship between having something with a theoretical background, so it makes sense, and still having some real inspiration and emotion in the music.
Yeah, and like no matter how big of a theory person you are, like, and sometimes they say they do, but I don't believe it. If when you're playing live in a live show in front of a mosh pit and you're sweating all over the guitar, there's no way in hell. Oh, I'm using the Mixolydian mode right now. Like you almost like have to forget about that, right?
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, sometimes perhaps it would be good if these thoughts kick in, because then I would actually remember what to sing when I sing a solo. But no, I think it's also when you are performing something live. Most of the time, you did it several times before. I mean, our first songs from 2006, we performed them like hundreds of times, and I don't think anything these days, because it just came from the back of my head, so to say. I don't have to think about lyrics or notes. They're just trained like I'm walking or breathing. So it would be a bad moment to think about music theory in these situations, I guess.
You want to know a trick on how to remember, the Dorian, the Phrygian? Like, do you remember all those scale modes?
Of course, I learned it sometimes, but at this I'm not good. So I could not tell you which solo is which scale. But what's the trick?
My old guitar teacher taught me this. I don't particularly like midgets attacking ladies. That's so.
What's a midget?
Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. So that's how you remember the first letter of every single thing.
Yeah, there are these tricks, for example, also for the how the different scales relate to each other and how the strings on a guitar work. So these are all in German that I know. But I did know about that one. Perhaps I can take it and finally learn how these scales work, because I don't.
Yeah, it helped me. I don't remember how to play them, but I do remember the order in which they are. So so it did some trick. And I have one more question for you. It's the most difficult question. I saved the most difficult one for last. Are you ready?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. How do you know when a song is done?
Songwriting wise?
Yeah.
Oh, I just feel it. I think That's a good question. I know it is done if I listen to it and I have the feeling that there's a flow from the very beginning to the end, that I don't have to think about what the next part is. So if it just feels naturally for me who wrote the song listening to it, then most probably 99% of the arrangement are done. Perhaps put it that way.
That was a very good technical, quick answer. That was good. I give you a B plus on that one. Oh, but
Thanks.
yeah,
Thanks.
90% of the time I give them an F. So that's
Thanks.
so. Before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for a great conversation, as well as giving us some new music to escape these uncertain times with. Is there just anything else with Van Canto that you would like to promote in terms of touring, or obviously, thanks to this certain virus that shall not be named, there's still some stuff that we need to work out. But like, obviously, we'll be seeing you on the road quite a bit once we get the okay, right? Can you come to the States soon?
Yeah, that's the plan. So I think personally, I think it will not happen before the festival season next summer, because all the summer festivals of 21 are already cancelled or postponed. So yeah, special situation, but this kind of music has to happen live, of course, and fingers crossed that it will happen soon.
Yeah, can you come to the States maybe?
Yeah, we never managed to. I have to admit, the only thing that we played were the 70,000 tons, and we tried to arrange some gigs around it, but it didn't work out. I think it's very hard for just for a German band to imagine all the distances that you have to do when you're doing US tour. I mean, in Germany, it's like we have like 3 hours ride from venue to venue at most. And for US tour, you really have to take your time to properly visit all the locations. Perhaps that's the reason, but I don't know. Time will tell.
Yeah.
In that relation, we are still young.
Yeah, of course, of course. And yeah, there's a lot of distractions on the road to all those venues too. Every band has to stop and check out, America's greatest cultural achievement, which is every fast food chain. So,
Of course.
yeah. But I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys come to the States, and thanks again for your time today. Everybody, we are here with Van Canto. Be sure to check out their brand new album, To the Power of Eight, out now. Be sure to pick it up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.